Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to explore a pretty wild but absolutely profound premise. What if true healing, and I mean the really deep understanding of who we are, actually requires us to completely bypass our rational minds? We spend so much of our lives trying to just think our way out of our problems. But today, we're going to learn the hidden nonverbal languages of the self.
So here's the big question. How do we heal when logic completely fails us? It's a vital question, right? Because when deep trauma, overwhelming anxiety, or just profound fear strikes, simply talking or thinking logically about it, well, it's rarely enough. Our standard cognitive tools, our everyday logic, they just aren't equipped for the true depths of the human psyche.
To figure this out, here is our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll start by confronting our inner fractures, move into listening to the body, decoding the unconscious mind, and healing soul and spirit. Then we'll look at the cinema of grace before finally integrating the whole self. Buckle up, because it's a fascinating journey taking us all the way from somatic biology to avant-garde film sets.
All right, let's dive right into Section 1, Confronting Our Inner Fractures.
When we go through a deeply fearful or traumatic event, our own fractured minds can actually unconsciously encourage that fear. Usually our gut instinct is to do one of two things, right? We either back away and hide, or we go on the offensive and aggressively attack the fear. But as Carl Jung pointed out, where your fear is, there is your task. So true inner work actually requires a middle ground. We have to learn to gently face and interact with our fear. We need to acknowledge it without letting our rational mind repress it, or worse, get totally consumed by it. Basically, we need a whole new way to communicate with our inner world.
Which brings us to Section 2, Listening to the Body.
Stepping out of the mind and into our physical selves brings us straight to the core of Dr. Peter Levine's somatic experiencing. Now, traditional talk therapies, they focus heavily on verbal processing, but somatic experiencing looks directly at our biology. See, when a traumatic event happens, the body's natural fight-or-flight response can actually get stuck. The stress energy literally gets trapped right inside our nervous system, all because the body was never able to complete its natural response to the threat. So to heal, we have to start speaking the language of physiological sensation.
So how do we actually process all that trapped physical energy? Levine breaks it down into 3 distinct steps. First up is titration. This means taking the trauma in incredibly small, bite-sized pieces so your nervous system isn't overwhelmed. Second is pendulation. That's gently oscillating your focus between a state of distress and a state of calm, just kind of finding a natural rhythm. And finally, discharge. This is the actual physical release of that trapped energy. It might happen through shaking, deep breathing, or grounding exercises. It's essentially allowing the body to finally complete that interrupted stress response.
Moving on to Section 3, Decoding the Unconscious Mind.
Carl Jung viewed our dreams as icebergs, just rising out of the deep, dark waters of the unconscious mind, and they serve some very distinct functions. They can be retrospective, which helps us digest early, past traumas. They can be integrative, helping to reconcile conflicting subpersonalities within us. Or they can be prospective, acting almost like harbingers of what we have the potential to become. And through techniques like active imagination, we can actually invite our fears to appear to us in symbolic form, maybe as a creature or an object, and we can literally have a two-way dialogue with them to transform their meaning. It's like a giant puzzle of the mind. Now, consider this absolutely stunning perspective from the 13th century Sufi mystic and poet Jalaluddin Rumi. He said, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." This introduces such a profound shift in perspective, doesn't it? Suffering isn't just some meaningless catastrophe, it's a doorway. It is the catalyst for profound spiritual transformation.
And right alongside Rumi, we have this quote from Carl Jung: "Dreams convey the transformative wisdom of the unconscious." The cross-pollination happening here is just brilliant. Think about it. Both ancient mystical poetry from the 13th century and modern psychoanalysis from the 20th century recognize the exact same truth. Confronting our inner wounds and engaging with our dreams is the ultimate vehicle for human growth.
Let's take this a step further in Section 4, Healing, Soul, and Spirit. Let's take a moment to contrast 2 very distinct models. The standard Western model often views mental distress as just a biological disorder, a set of symptoms to be managed. But the classical Islamic and Sufi model views psychological pain holistically. It sees it as an existential wound, a disturbance of the nafs or ego, and a rupture in the heart's connection to the divine.
So suffering is reframed here. It's not a meaningless failure. It's a vital opportunity to refine your character and elevate your spirit.
This brings us to the really fascinating concept of fitra. Sufi psychology offers this profoundly comforting teaching. Beneath all the layers of pain and trauma, every single person possesses a core of untouched wholeness and pristine purity. No matter what has happened to you in the past, this divine light within the soul cannot be permanently contaminated. Healing, then, is simply the journey of uncovering and remembering this unbroken self.
So how do we uncover it? Well, through practices like dhikr, muraqabah, and muhasabah. And guys, here is an incredible aha moment. Dhikr involves synchronized, rhythmic breathing and chanting. From a purely biological perspective, this downregulates the fight-or-flight response by engaging the parasympathetic nervous system. It achieves the exact same physiological relief as Peter Levine's somatic experiencing. The spiritual and the physical are literally speaking the exact same language.
And I've got a really surprising historical fact for you. This holistic approach, it is ancient. Way back in the 10th century, the physician Abu Bakr al-Razi founded early psychiatric wards in Baghdad that actually utilized talk and music therapy. And even earlier, in the 9th century, the scholar al-Balkhi pioneered a method of replacing negative, irrational thoughts with positive, logical ones. That is centuries before the West, quote-unquote, invented cognitive behavioral therapy.
Let's shift gears and look outward in Section 5, the Cinema of Grace.
First, we need to define a really crucial word here, the numinous. The numinous is an experiential intensity. It's this impersonal sacred force, an affective surplus that permeates the world, and it completely defies rational logic. You literally cannot think your way into the numinous, you just have to feel it. And this perfectly encapsulates the spiritual dimension of some of our greatest filmmakers.
Take the legendary Russian director Andrei Tarkovsky, for example. He didn't use cinema as a vehicle for fast-paced, action-packed plots. Instead, he practiced cinematic asceticism. He intentionally decelerated the image, focusing deeply on the textures of matter, things like water, fire, and ruins. By slowing down time, he de-automated our everyday vision, forcing us into a deeply meditative state where the sacred could just naturally grow from within the material world right there on the screen.
And we see a brilliant modern continuation of this idea in the work of director Terrence Malick and cinematographer Emmanuel Lubezki. Malick famously tosses out rigid scripts. He actively seeks to capture unpredictable, serendipitous grace. He might literally hand his actors a philosophical poem instead of dialogue, forcing them to rely purely on intuition. By prioritizing natural light, constant movement, and discovery in the editing room, Malick's films mimic the fluid, associative process of human memory and spiritual searching.
And that brings us to our final section, integrating the whole self. So pulling all these threads together, the absolutely crucial point is this. True integration and healing require us to become multilingual. We just cannot rely on logic alone. We have to cross-pollinate all these different layers. The physiological sensations of our nervous system, the symbolic languages of our dreams, the enduring grace of our untouchable soul, and the poetic numinous beauty we find in art, these are the hidden languages of healing. They are all distinct, sure, but they're all pointing us toward the exact same truth of who we really are.
So I'll leave you with this thought. If our bodies, our dreams, and our art are all speaking the language of grace, are we finally ready to listen? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I hope this journey has inspired you to tune in to the hidden languages of your own inner healing. Until next time, keep exploring.